Hi, good afternoon, folks. I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin. We've had some heavy rain moving through the area, and under normal circumstances, this wouldn't be a big deal. But because we had been so saturated from the rainfall, especially in parts of Slidell and the Mississippi coast, any heavy rainfall really across much of the area can cause some street flooding. Now, thankfully, other than at a time, we have had some flooding across parts of Hancock and into Harrison County from Bay St. Louis across Biloxi from some very heavy rain that had been training, and it does look like a lot of that is starting to wrap up. But what we have seen in terms of flooding in the parts of southeast Louisiana, including some of the metro area and now including Slidell, has been more of the street flooding. Though more of a nuisance flooding can cause some issues, especially as we get closer to the evening drive home. And we have had a number of reports of either roads or a lot of underpasses already underwater because of these heavy rainfall rates. Now, thankfully, you'll also notice on radar that we do get some breaks. Kind of a heavy round of rain has just pushed through the city, now moving up towards Slidell, and then a break. Another batch of some heavier showers from Thibodaux and Houma. Also notice that flashing polygon. There is a severe thunderstorm with some gusty winds around that thunderstorm in the Houma area. And then south of that, notice we do have a bit of a break. We'll kind of take a look at satellite here in just a second to show you where that rainfall is, or if there is any additional rainfall coming in from the south. So let's start with what's happening down along the coastline. And from the bayou parishes, we've had these heavier storms moving in from the Gulf, and it seems as though as they first move inland, they still are associated with some strong winds, and that's when you see those severe thunderstorm warnings issued. As they continue up toward the city, we haven't really seen them continue that threat of severe weather, at least in terms of the strongest winds. Still some gusty winds, but they have been leveling off a bit as they move farther and farther inland. So other than the heavy rainfall threat over the city, the severe threat really isn't there. But as I mentioned, we are getting breaks in the rain, and that is a good thing because it's kind of a lighter shower activity from the city down toward Houma. You're going to have another batch of this heavy rainfall moving toward the city within the next, say, 30 minutes or so. And then south of that, it doesn't look like we have much of anything, but we'll take a look at satellite in just a second. Here's a look at rain on radar around the metro area, kind of zooming in a little bit closer. Had some of those heavy downpours quickly, in excess of 1.5 to 2 inches of rain per hour. Now, of course, these are not just sitting over the city. Otherwise, we would have easily accumulated more than 2 inches of rainfall in a very short period of time. That 1.5 to 2 inch rainfall rate just kind of gives us an idea of the excessive nature of the rainfall. And sometimes it doesn't take much to get those streets covered with floodwaters. And at times you just don't know how deep it is and whether or not you're going to hit a pothole. So just use caution and never drive over flooded roads. Turn around, don't drown. Not that drowning would be much of an issue, but certainly stalled cars are a bit more of an issue, although drowning does become more of a threat at some of those underpasses. So the heavier of the rain is starting to move away from the city. We'll zoom in on radar around the city just to get an idea of where some of that heavy rainfall is across parts of Orleans Parish. Now it's a little bit beyond the Gentilly area out toward, moving toward New Orleans East, and then eventually it's going to continue up in the direction of Slidell. And while it's going to continue moving through Slidell, right now we've already got the heavy rainfall, and the Weather Service was quick to issue a street flood advisory for Slidell and parts of southeastern St. Tammany Parish, because this is all the area that had seen that 10 to 12 inches of rain late Friday and early Saturday from Claudette. So this ground is completely saturated, and so it would not take much to get that water refilling some of the drainage basins and the ditches, as well as moving onto the roadway. So certainly a street flood concern from Lacombe to Slidell, Pearlington, and up toward Picayune as these heavy storms continue along that trajectory. Again, thankfully, none of these really look to be in terms of severe. They have been as they move toward the Theriot, Houma, Thibodaux area, and then they tend to weaken a bit, at least in terms of the strong winds, but certainly some very heavy rainfall rates. And let's go backwards here, go toward the city and look at some of the rainfall rates of what is moving over the city and moving in the direction of the city right now. You see those brighter colors here with the kind of the pinks, the deep purples, and almost white. That's going from a heavy to more extreme rainfall rate. Now, thankfully, the more extreme rates are fairly isolated in nature, but we can kind of take a look at what those rates are. Now, at the moment, some of the highest totals that we're seeing are over the lake, but they are in excess right now of 3 inches per hour. So very, very heavy downpours that are moving towards Slidell. So folks in Slidell, again, the heads up, you're getting heavy rainfall now. Heavier rain is out over the eastern part of Lake Pontchartrain, and it is moving in your direction. And now a little bit more southwest of the city, the rainfall rates are in the Houma area, about, let's say, 2 inches per hour. So not as excessive, but certainly something that could cause street flooding concerns. And that's why the street flood advisory, which is in effect for the metro area, is going to be in effect until 5:45. We're at 3:45 right now. So for another 2 hours, even though we are getting a break in the rainfall, notice the rainfall rates with the showers that we have over us at the moment are more on the light scale, where it's not anything that would lead to flooding, but certainly it's not helping the situation. But at least as long as the intensity of the rainfall does begin to diminish a bit, it will allow for storm basins to kind of catch up and some of that water on the streets to begin draining a bit more. All right, so we have a flash flood warning in Orleans Parish. Okay, is that just coming in? Let's see. Okay, it looks like it just came into our to my system here. So we have a flash flood warning from these storms until 3 o'clock, or excuse me, till 5 o'clock over Metro New Orleans. So let's take a look at the radar again and just show you where we are talking about. Okay, so what had been more of a street flood advisory, Weather Service has gone ahead and just upgraded that to a flash flood warning. Now again, you may be under it right now. Again, this is covering a very large portion of our population, and you may be thinking, well, the rain has stopped, it's done. Well, they usually will issue these warnings for either ongoing flooding, and will keep them into effect because of the potential for either it's just going to take that long for all of that water to drain, or if there is the anticipation of more rainfall. So yes, we are getting a break in the rainfall, and that is certainly a good thing, but we do have more coming. And again, excess of 2, maybe even higher rainfall rates, 2 inches per hour. And that is all moving toward the city right now. So keep that in mind for parts of the metro area. If you have the flooded roadways now, it's probably going to stay high for the next few hours. As though we have a break coming and we might see that water level drop, it's probably going to come right back up as another heavy round of rain is moving toward us. I was talking about satellite, and I want to jump over to that real quick just to show you as we colorize satellite here, we get an idea of if those storms. I was talking about the heavy rainfall around the Slidell, or excuse me, around the Houma area, and it looks like we're getting a little bit of a break now. And this is colorized satellite. We tend to show this a little bit more often with the tropical season in terms of a blossoming thunderstorm cluster. And boy, there are some big thunderstorms off in the Gulf waters. This satellite looks far more impressive than Claudette did when it was in the Gulf. And this is just a batch of heavy thunderstorms. Now we are getting, again, there go those heavier storms over the Houma area. And when we colorize satellite, what we're doing is actually showing you the temperatures of the clouds, and it's almost kind of reverse thinking that the reds to dark reds to almost black colors are your colder temperatures. Those are the colder cloud types because they have gotten taller into the atmosphere, so they're capable of holding more moisture, and thus you get higher rainfall rates. So yes, we do have a break that's moving from home. And now again, this round that's on the way to the city, we should get a bit of a break, but notice there is still more development at the end of the Gulf of Mexico. Now models have been indicating that this system will start weakening as we get into the later evening and nighttime hours, but let's wait to see what actually verifies. But it does appear as though once we get this next little surge that's moving in from the bayou parishes and we'll move over the city, we should get a fairly decent break. As what you're also seeing are the taller cloud tops in the atmosphere from those heavier thunderstorms that are well offshore. So these are, as the cloud tops are kind of building into the atmosphere and getting much, much higher, these tops of those clouds are much, much colder as they are higher into the atmosphere. So not necessarily that this is all heavy rainfall moving in our direction. This looks more of the blow-off cloud tops from those more intense storms that are well off in the more central and western Gulf of Mexico. So this is the next little round of rain headed our way, and then we should have a fairly decent break, if not kind of an ending to some of the heavier rainfall as we do continue through the rest of the late afternoon and evening hours. So again, just kind of updating folks as to what we're looking at right now. We do have a new a new flash flood warning For the city of New Orleans, really for the metro area, it does include parts of the river parishes, so from St. Charles Parish across northern Jefferson and a good portion of Orleans Parish. That's going to be in effect until, let's see, we are, let's see, let me see if I can minimize this because I'm getting our news meeting as it is still on here. And let me leave the meeting so I can mute that. Okay, so we have seen the the flash flood warning, which is still in effect for Jefferson, Orleans, and St. Charles. This is actually in effect until 6:45. I had earlier was told it was at till 5 o'clock. That's going to be in effect until 6:45. So it's going to go for another several hours or so. Weather Service office is saying that Slidell has already picked up 1.17 inches of rainfall in less than 30 minutes. So in less than a half hour, they had already picked up over an inch of rain. And again, these are in areas of Slidell that are already completely saturated. 10 to 12 inches of rainfall on Friday and early Saturday. We had a drier, mostly dry weekend, thankfully, but this is certainly not helping anything. And certainly that heavy rainfall that is moving up toward the Slidell area at the moment could lead to some additional flooding. So wouldn't be a surprise, especially based on some of the rainfall rates that are headed up toward the Lacombe, Slidell area, Pearlington. We may see that become a flash flood warning as opposed to just a street flood advisory, which it is right now. Again, for St. Charles, Jefferson, and much of Orleans Parish, including the city of New Orleans, we do have a flash flood warning, which is in effect. Now, there is another batch of heavy rainfall. Thankfully, this doesn't look quite as large as that first batch that moved through. In other words, this one shouldn't last quite as long, but let's take a look at the rainfall rates associated now with this new batch that is starting to move into the area. Heavy rainfall rates have been in excess of about 3 inches that are moving up towards Slidell, and we're going to get to those in just a second. But here we go with the rainfall rates around the Houma area. And I'm going to kind of zoom in here so we can really get a tight look. Now, you are going to find some pockets of heavier rainfall rates, and I'll kind of start with some of those pockets. Just to the south around Grambois and south of Lockport, you're over 2.5 inches of rain per hour. So a good estimate for all of this rainfall coming in 1.75 is probably about 2 to 3 inches per hour within this entire cluster of rain that is moving across the bayou parishes, will impact the river parishes, and then into the metro area within the next hour or so, as these are at least moving. They're not stalling, but we're getting that training effect of rainfall. This is actually not a tropical disturbance. This is all associated with kind of an upper trough that is sitting across the northern Gulf Coast and into the Gulf of Mexico, which is why we've seen so much rainfall. That's going to still be with us tomorrow, so we are expecting another chance for some heavy downpours at times during the course of the day tomorrow. Now, the risk of flooding looks to be a little bit lower, but it's still there for tomorrow afternoon. So the rainfall rates from some of this heavier rain that is moving toward the city at the moment is in excess of, I would give a rough estimate of about, at the highest, about 2 to 3 inches per hour. So this is looking at the rainfall rates, not the reflectivity, which you're used to seeing on radar, but the rainfall rates. And kind of within this batch from Houma down toward Terrio, Lockport, Raceland, this is all moving, eventually continuing through parts of the river parishes and then into Metro New Orleans within the next hour or so. And this next batch is about 2 to 3 inches per hour. So if you do have some street flooding, at least we have a break in the rainfall. I'll switch back over to reflectivity. At least we do have some breaks in that heavy rain, but another round of some very heavy rain is moving in the direction of where we have just seen that first batch of heavy rain. That's all now moving up toward the Slidell area. So at least we're getting a little bit of a reprieve from the heavy rain. Still some light showers out there, and hopefully this is allowing for just natural drainage to kind of catch up. Again, what we saw Friday and Saturday in the city wasn't nearly as extensive as what we saw up towards Slidell, and they're going to get in on the rainfall, that heavy rainfall coming in at the moment, and that's going to continue for a little while longer. Let's jump over again and look at the rainfall rates in the Slidell area and also kind of get an idea of what is to come. Some of the rainfall rates that we have seen moving towards Slidell looks like more of a kind of a heavier path around the Lacombe area at the moment, but some of those rainfall rates are in excess of, and again, just kind of get a rough estimate of what they are. You find some pockets of about, still nearing about 3 inches per hour. And as I mentioned, folks at the National Weather Service office have said, the National Weather Service office is in northern Slidell. They already picked up almost 1.25 inches in less than a half hour. So another half hour and you're going to already have approaching 3 inches of rain. So it is not going to take much to get another very heavy accumulation type event that will lead to more flooding. And it sounds like some new information is coming in. Okay, so a street flood advisory for Lafourche, St. Charles, and Terrebonne until 7 o'clock. Again, all the areas where that heavy rainfall is moving in at the moment. Down south of here, a new street flood advisory has been issued for those folks, and that's going to be in effect until 7 o'clock. At the moment, it is still just a flood advisory, street flood advisory for St. Tammany Parish, and again, this is just for more of the kind of eastern Mandeville, Lacombe, Slidell area where we had the heavier rainfall on Saturday morning, and now where a lot of the heavy rainfall is focused once again. And as they also mentioned in their discussion, I'm saying the National Weather Service office, they're getting some rainfall rates of around 3 to 4 inches. We're kind of seeing maybe more the low end of that, but certainly the possibility of some more approaching 3.5 to 4 inches per hour. And again, that just gives you an idea. If the storm were to stay completely stationary, you would pick up 4 inches of rainfall in an hour. Thankfully, they are not just sitting idle, they are moving. But with those rainfall rates of 4 inches per hour, you are going to see a great deal of accumulation. And as I mentioned, over 1 inch at the Slidell Airport in less than a half hour. So these are very high rainfall rate type of storms moving into the Slidell area, across the Metro New Orleans area, from down around the Houma area. Now, thankfully, if there is any silver lining here, is that we do get some breaks in that rainfall, and we have seen quite a few breaks. Heavy rain is moving over Slidell now. Over the city, we've got a break, but more is coming, and that's what's down around the Houma Thibodaux area. This is all moving in our direction. Now, this new green polygon you see is a street flood advisory. Rainfall has been fairly pretty limited in terms of how much we saw just from a few days ago, especially out farther to the west and southwest. So we didn't see nearly the accumulation from just a couple of days. So folks down in the bayou parishes can actually withstand a lot more rain than we can in the city, and especially more than they can in Slidell. And it's actually kind of interesting that the National Weather Service has not gone ahead yet and just issued a flash flood warning for that part of St. Tammany Parish for Slidell. Again, the flash flood warning right now for Jefferson, Orleans, and St. Charles Parish until 6:45. Now, that does not mean that the rain is going to continue through 6:45. Matter of fact, it looks like we're going to get this next band within the next hour or so moving over the metro area, and they are moving at a pretty decent clip. So then probably by about 5:30 to 6, most of that heavy rainfall should be gone from the city. Just considering, though, that by 6 o'clock, though, say most of the heavy rainfall is already gone from the city, it takes a whole lot longer for all of that water to drain. So what the Weather Service does is they leave those warnings in effect for a much longer period, even after the rain event ends, only because it usually takes quite a bit of time for all of that water to start to recede. And until conditions really start to improve across a large portion of the warned area, will the Weather Service go ahead and allow a warning to expire. So even though I think the rain is going to be gone from the city at 6:45 this evening, they're still going to have some likely street flooding issues until about 6:45 or even later in some isolated locations, especially in the areas that just take a lot longer to drain, such as a lot of our underpasses. So the next round is coming in from the Houma Thibodaux area. That will be moving over the city shortly. We have some very heavy rainfall over Slidell right now. That is going to continue at least for the next hour, I would say, just looking at the radar pattern right now. Probably not quite that long, but certainly for at least the next half hour. Again, these are at least moving at a fairly decent clip, and it doesn't look like all of southeastern St. Tammany Parish is getting it, because as you get a little bit more toward the Wrigley is not quite as heavy, so it's more along the line from, say, Highway 11 out toward Lacombe and maybe extreme eastern Mandeville along I-12 and I'm just kind of getting an idea of where some of the heavy band is setting up. And it really looks like it's in a far more narrow band across southeastern St. Tammany Parish at the moment. So that is some good news. We've got the break over the city and a bit more rainfall down toward Des Allemands, Thibodaux, Houma that is moving toward us right now. So we'll kind of wrap things up at the moment. Let's see, heavy rain at Bayou Cane in Terrebonne, 1.47 inch, and that was in 1 hour. So almost an inch and a half at Bayou Cane and Terrebonne in about an hour. So that's a pretty high rainfall rate from those storms that have been coming out of the bayou parishes. Again, always looking for that silver lining. The storms have not really been severe. We had some gusty winds as those thunderstorms initially moved into the bayou parishes, but they didn't really maintain that strong wind as they moved up toward the city. So the main threat, though, continuing for the next couple of hours, is going to be for the flash flooding, and it is not everywhere. I'll widen out radar. This is certainly not everywhere, as most of the heavy rain, at least over the last several hours, has been contained from kind of a band that has started to set up from southwestern, say, Terrebonne Parish, and moves across the city and up towards Slidell. So up across most of Tangier Hope Parish, Washington, most of St. Tammany for that matter, relatively dry through this afternoon. And then as you go south and east, down toward the mouth of the river and even parts of, actually much of Plaquemines Parish, the rainfall has not been nearly as heavy. A lot of river parishes have been getting in kind of the western edge of some of these heavier downpours as far as Thibodaux goes, if they do hold together and move across the river parishes. But it's been really more of a St. Charles to St. John Parish, not nearly as much as St. James Parish as they continue on. I hear my little beep here. Let's see, we had a report in the city of New Orleans, not entirely sure where in the city, but local storm report of 1.5 inches in an hour. So in the city of New Orleans, we got 1.5 inches of rainfall. Normal circumstances, that isn't a huge deal, but we also know it depends on where in the city of New Orleans that happened. Here in the French Quarter, wouldn't be that big of a deal. Parts of the city where it's a little bit lower, yeah, that suddenly becomes a bit of an issue for street flooding and getting into, hopefully not homes, but sometimes vehicles parked out on the streets, and suddenly that water starts getting into cars. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a widespread concern over the city. We're getting that break right now. Another round is headed toward the city at the moment, and we are seeing kind of an ongoing heavy rainfall over parts of the Slidell area, though it doesn't look like it's nearly as widespread over southeastern St. Tammany Parish as it was on early Saturday morning. So that is at least some good news. Unless we get some new information here, I'm going to start kind of wrapping this up, and we will, of course, update all of this online as well as on Eyewitness News coming up at 5 and 6. For now, I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Franklin.